Disclaimer. This podcast episode is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and I am not giving medical advice. Peptides and research compounds are not FDA approved for most uses, and they are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always talk to a licensed medical provider before starting any new supplement, peptide, medication, or health protocol. Never self-diagnose, and never ignore professional medical advice. Use caution, do your own research, and be smart about your health. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are going to talk about one of the most talked about peptides in the anti-aging and longevity world, and that is Epithalon. You have probably heard the name floating around in peptide groups. You have probably seen people claiming it reverse their biological age, improve sleep, help their skin, help their immune system, and even help their hair. And if you are new to peptides, Epithalon is one of those names that sounds like it belongs in a sci-fi movie. But the truth is, Epithalon is not new at all. It has been studied for decades, and it has a fascinating backstory that ties directly into one of the biggest aging mechanisms we know about. And that is telomeres. So in this episode, I am going to break Epithalon down in a way that actually makes sense. What it is, what it does, why people use it, how it is commonly dosed, what results people report, and what you need to be careful about if you are considering it. Because as exciting as Epithalon is, it is still a research peptide, and it is not something to be careless with. So, let's start with the basics. What is Epithalon? Epithalon, sometimes spelled Epithalon, is a synthetic peptide that is made up of 4 amino acids. That means it is a tetrapeptide. Its sequence is alanine, glutamic acid, aspartic acid, and glycine. If you have ever seen it written in peptide form, you might see it as alloglyce PGLY. And that is Epithalon. Now, Epithalon is based on a naturally occurring substance in the human body called epithalon. Epithalon is extracted from the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is extremely important because it plays a major role in hormone regulation, circadian rhythm, and melatonin production. So already, right there, you can see why Epithalon has a reputation for helping with sleep and overall aging. Because it is tied to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is heavily involved in how we age. Now, Epithalon was studied heavily by a Russian scientist named Professor Vladimir Kovintsin. If you have ever heard the name Kovintsin, it is because he is basically the godfather of bioregulator peptides. His research includes a huge range of peptides that are designed to support specific organs and systems. And Epithalon became one of the most famous ones because it was linked to telomere regulation. So now we need to pause and talk about telomeres. Because if you understand telomeres, you will understand why Epithalon became such a big deal. Telomeres are protective caps on the ends of your chromosomes. Think of them like the plastic tips on the ends of shoelaces. The plastic tip keeps the shoelace from fraying. And telomeres do something similar for your DNA. They protect your genetic material from getting damaged. Now here is the problem. Every time your cells divide, telomeres get a little bit shorter. Over time, as telomeres shorten, cells become less able to divide properly. They become less functional. They become older. And eventually they stop dividing altogether. That process is strongly linked to aging. So telomere shortening is considered one of the major biological hallmarks of aging. Now, your body does have an enzyme called telomerase. Telomerase helps rebuild telomeres. It helps maintain them. But telomerase is not super active in most adult tissues. It is active in stem cells, and it is active in reproductive cells. But in most of the rest of the body, it is relatively low. So the question becomes, if telomere shortening is part of aging, and telomerase helps maintain telomeres, can we stimulate telomerase activity in a safe way? That is where Epithalon enters the conversation. Epithalon became famous because research suggested it could increase telomerase activity, meaning it may help maintain telomere length. And that is why Epithalon is often referred to as a telomere peptide. Now, I want to be very clear. In the peptide world, you will hear a lot of hype. People will say things like Epithalon reverses aging, or Epithalon makes you live 20 years longer. And I need you to understand something. Nothing is that simple. Aging is extremely complex. Epithalon is not a magic bullet. But the telomerase research is one of the reasons Epithalon is considered one of the most promising peptides in the longevity space. Now, what does Epithalon actually do in the body? Epithalon appears to influence gene expression. It seems to work as a signaling peptide. That means it doesn't force your body to do something unnatural. It may instead act like a biological messenger that reminds your cells how to function more youthfully. That is the idea. Some of the main effects associated with Epithalon include supporting the pineal gland, regulating melatonin, supporting circadian rhythm, influencing immune function, and potentially influencing telomere length through telomerase activation. And those are huge categories. Because if you improve sleep, circadian rhythm, and immune regulation, you're already affecting some of the biggest factors involved in aging and disease risk. Now, let's talk about why people actually take Epithalon. Because if you go into peptide communities, you will notice Epithalon is used for a few main reasons. Number 1, longevity and anti-aging. Number 2, improved sleep and melatonin production. Number 3, immune support. Number 4, recovery and inflammation control. Number 5, overall hormone balance. And number 6, skin and appearance benefits. So, let's break these down one by one. First, longevity and anti-aging. Epithalon is popular because people believe it supports cellular longevity. It is often described as a peptide that helps your body function younger, longer. Some people take it specifically because they want to support telomere health. Others take it because they feel like it helps with energy, mental clarity, and overall vitality. Now second, sleep. This is one of the biggest reasons people fall in love with Epithalon. Because a lot of users report improved sleep quality. They report deeper sleep. They report more vivid dreams. They report falling asleep faster. And they report waking up feeling more rested. Now, why would Epithalon affect sleep? Because of its connection to the pineal gland and melatonin regulation. Melatonin is one of the most important hormones in the body for sleep, circadian rhythm, and even immune function. And as we age, melatonin production tends to decline. So, if Epithalon helps normalize melatonin patterns, that could explain why it is associated with better sleep. Third, immune support. The immune system is another huge aging factor. As people age, immune function becomes weaker and more dysregulated. You get more inflammation, more autoimmune activity, and more vulnerability to infections. Epithalon has been studied in the context of immune modulation, meaning it may help the immune system function more efficiently. Not necessarily by overstimulating it, but by helping it regulate itself. Fourth, recovery and inflammation. Many users report that Epithalon helps with recovery. They report less joint pain, less stiffness, better healing, and improved overall inflammation levels. Now, Epithalon is not primarily known as a healing peptide like BPC 157 or TB 500. But people often stack Epithalon into recovery protocols because of its systemic anti-aging benefits. Fifth, hormone balance. Epithalon has been associated with improvements in endocrine function. The endocrine system includes the pineal gland, thyroid, adrenal glands, reproductive hormones, and more. Now, it is not accurate to say Epithalon directly increases testosterone or directly increases estrogen. But it may help regulate the body's hormonal rhythm. And for many people, better sleep equals better hormones. Because sleep is the foundation for growth hormone release, cortisol balance, and metabolic function. So sometimes what people think is a hormone boost is actually a sleep boost. And sleep is the most anabolic thing you can give your body. And finally, 6, skin and appearance benefits. A lot of users report their skin looks healthier. They report improved glow, better elasticity, less dryness. Some even report hair improvements. Now, again, Epithalon is not a cosmetic peptide like GHKCU. But because it is tied to cellular aging, some people believe it has a more subtle, systemic effect that shows up in appearance. Now, let's talk about the science versus the hype. Because Epithalon is one of those peptides where people take a few real scientific ideas and then stretch them into fantasy. So, let's keep this grounded. Epithalon has been studied in animal models, and it has been studied in humans in some research contexts. Much of the research comes from Russia. And one of the most famous claims is that Epithalon may increase lifespan in certain animal models. Now, does that mean it will make humans live longer? We do not know, but it is one of the reasons it gained popularity. Another major claim is telomerase activation. There were studies suggesting Epithalon could stimulate telomerase activity in human somatic cells, which is extremely unusual. Because again, most adult cells do not have high telomerase activity. So, if Epithalon truly influences telomerase, that is significant. But here is where we have to be cautious. Telomerase is a double-edged sword, because telomerase activity is also associated with cancer cell immortality. Many cancer cells have very high telomerase activity. That is how they keep dividing endlessly. So when you hear people say Epithalon activates telomerase, you need to understand why that makes some people nervous. Because anything that increases telomerase might theoretically increase cancer risk if someone already has cancer cells developing. Now, that does not mean Epithalon causes cancer. There is no strong evidence that it directly causes cancer. But the telomerase conversation is one of the reasons Epithalon should be treated with respect, especially for anyone with a history of cancer, suspicious growths, or a high risk of cancer. Now, what does Epithalon feel like? This is a question people always ask. And the truth is, Epithalon is not usually dramatic. It is not like taking a stimulant. It is not like taking a GLP-1 where appetite changes quickly. It is not like PT-141 where you feel something in an hour. Epithalon is more subtle. Most people report noticing changes in sleep first. Better sleep. More vivid dreams. More restful mornings. Then, after a couple of weeks, some people report improved mood. Improved mental clarity. More stable energy. Less inflammation. Less soreness. Some people report a stronger sense of well-being. And some people report nothing at all. And that is important, because peptides are not one-size-fits-all. Your age matters. Your baseline health matters. Your stress levels matter. Your hormone levels matter. And your sleep patterns matter. If your sleep is already amazing, you might not notice much. But if your sleep has been terrible for years, Epithalon can feel like a life upgrade. Now, let's talk about Epithalon dosing. This is where people get confused. Because Epithalon is typically used in cycles, not as a daily forever peptide. Most people do not run Epithalon year-round. Instead, they run it in what is called a protocol. And there are a few popular protocols. The first is the classic anti-aging cycle. That is usually 10 milligrams per day for 10 days. That is one of the most common Epithalon protocols. 10 milligrams daily for 10 days. And then you stop. And you do not run it again for several months. Some people repeat that cycle every 3 months. Some repeat every 6 months. Some do it once per year. Another common protocol is 5 milligrams per day for 20 days. Same idea. Lower daily dose, longer duration. So 5 milligrams daily for 20 days. That is another very popular cycle. A third approach is microdosing. Some people do 1 to 2 milligrams per day for 30 days. Or even 1 milligram daily for 60 days. Now, microdosing is less traditional, but some people prefer it because they feel it is gentler. Now, here is the important part. Epithalon is often described as a reset peptide, meaning people use it as a periodic reboot. They do a cycle, then they stop, and they let their body integrate the changes. Now, how do people inject Epithalon? Typically, Epithalon is injected subcutaneously. That means into fat tissue, just like most peptides. Common injection sites include the abdomen, love handles, thighs, or glutes. Some people inject it intramuscularly, meaning into muscle. But subcutaneous injection is far more common. And many people find it easier and more comfortable. Now, can Epithalon be taken orally? No, not in a reliable way. Like most peptides, it breaks down in the digestive system. So if you swallow it, you are basically wasting it. Now, some people use nasal sprays. But the most reliable method is injection. Now, what time of day should Epithalon be taken? This is another big question. Because of its association with melatonin and circadian rhythm, many people prefer taking it at night. Some take it right before bed. Some take it in the evening. Others take it in the morning and still report benefits. But if your goal is sleep improvement, most people take it at night. Now, let's talk about side effects. Because Epithalon is usually well tolerated, but that does not mean it has no side effects. The most common side effects people report include mild headache, mild dizziness, vivid dreams, temporary fatigue, or feeling sleepy during the day. And some people report a strange shift in sleep for the first few days, meaning they might wake up more, or have more intense dreams, or feel like their sleep cycle is adjusting. This usually settles. Another common issue is injection site irritation, redness, itching, a little swelling. That can happen with almost any peptide, especially if the peptide is not mixed properly or if someone is sensitive. Now, one of the most important side effect categories to mention is hormone disruption. Because Epithalon interacts with circadian rhythm and endocrine regulation, it can cause subtle hormonal shifts. Some people feel more calm. Some people feel more emotional. Some people feel more energetic. Some people feel sleepy. So the effect is not identical for everyone. Now, let's talk about who should avoid Epithalon. This is extremely important. If someone is pregnant or breastfeeding, they should not use Epithalon. If someone has active cancer or a history of certain cancers, they should be extremely cautious and speak with a doctor. If someone has a serious autoimmune condition, they should be cautious because immune modulation can go in different directions. Now, many people with autoimmune conditions do use Epithalon and feel better. But you should never assume that immune modulation will always help. It depends on the person. If someone is on immunosuppressant drugs, they should talk to their doctor. If someone has uncontrolled psychiatric conditions, they should be cautious because sleep and hormone changes can affect mood. And if someone is taking sleep medications, antidepressants, or anything affecting serotonin and melatonin, they should also be cautious. Now, let's talk about stacking. Because in the peptide world, nobody takes one peptide. They always stack. So, what does Epithalon stack well with? Epithalon is commonly stacked with other anti-aging peptides, especially ones that work on different pathways. A very common stack is Epithalon with NAD+. Because NAD supports mitochondrial function and Epithalon supports circadian and cellular aging. That is a popular longevity stack. Another common stack is Epithalon with thymosin alpha 1. Because thymosin alpha 1 is known for immune modulation and immune support. So people will run Epithalon and thymosin alpha 1 together during certain immune and longevity cycles. Another common stack is Epithalon with BPC 157 and TB 500. That is more of a recovery stack. People will run Epithalon while also running healing peptides, especially if they're trying to reduce inflammation and improve overall tissue function. Epithalon also stacks well with GHKCU if someone is focused on skin rejuvenation. Because GHKCU is more direct for skin, collagen, and healing. And Epithalon is more systemic and anti-aging. Now, Epithalon is also sometimes stacked with pineolin. Pineolin is another bioregulator peptide that is tied to brain and nervous system support. Some people like running Epithalon with pineolin as a longevity brain stack. Now, can Epithalon be stacked with growth hormone peptides like CJC, 1295, ipamorelin, or sermorelin? Yes, and many people do. Because growth hormone release declines with age. And Epithalon is often used in older individuals. So stacking Epithalon with a growth hormone secretagogue protocol is very common. Now, here is where you have to be careful. If you stack too many peptides at once, you will not know what is doing what. So, if you are new, you might want to start Epithalon alone. Or, at least start it with a very basic stack. Because if you throw in 10 peptides and you suddenly feel amazing, you have no clue what caused it. And if you feel terrible, you also have no clue what caused it. So, be strategic. Now, let's talk about Epithalon's reputation in the longevity community. Epithalon is considered one of the closest things we have to a true longevity peptide. It is not just a performance peptide. It is not just a fat loss peptide. It is not just a sexual peptide. It is not just a healing peptide. It is more of a long-term cellular optimization peptide. And that is why people love it. Because the peptide community is full of people who want quick results. They want appetite suppression in a week. They want libido changes in an hour. They want muscle gain in a month. But Epithalon is a different vibe. Epithalon is for people thinking long-term. People who want to still feel young 10 years from now. People who want their sleep, immune system, and energy to stay stable as they age. That is the appeal. Now, I want to talk about a huge misconception. People assume Epithalon is just melatonin. It is not. Melatonin is a hormone you can buy over the counter. Epithalon is not simply adding melatonin. Epithalon may influence the pineal gland's function, meaning it could influence the body's own melatonin rhythm. That is a different thing. And if you have ever taken melatonin supplements and felt groggy the next day, you might understand why some people prefer something that supports natural regulation instead of forcing a dose. Now, does Epithalon work for everyone? No. And that is important. Some people feel like it did nothing, and others swear it changed their life. And that is because aging is different for everyone. If you are 25 and sleeping like a baby, you might not notice much. If you are 45, stressed out, waking up at 3 a.m. and feeling inflamed, you might notice a lot. Now, let's talk about the difference between Epithalon and Epithalon. You might see both spellings. Most of the time, it is the same peptide being referred to. Epithalon and Epithalon are usually used interchangeably. The key is the amino acid sequence. If it is the tetrapeptide, then you are dealing with the same compound. Now, let's talk about the difference between Epithalon and epithalamine. Epithalamine is the natural extract from the pineal gland. Epithalon is the synthetic version that is easier to manufacture and standardize. Most peptide suppliers carry Epithalon, not epithalamion. Now, let's talk about what results people typically report after a cycle. Most users report one of the following: better sleep, more consistent sleep schedule, less waking up at night, more vivid dreams, more calm mood, less anxiety, better recovery, less inflammation, improved skin texture, improved energy, and sometimes improved libido. Now, libido is not a primary Epithalon effect. But again, if your sleep improves, your hormones improve. If your hormones improve, libido improves. So it can happen indirectly. Now, some people also report a strange benefit. They say they feel more emotionally balanced, less reactive, less stressed. That is likely tied to circadian rhythm and cortisol regulation, because cortisol is your stress hormone, and cortisol rhythm is directly connected to sleep cycles. So if Epithalon improves sleep, it may improve cortisol balance, and that can change how you feel during the day. Now let's talk about Epithalon and aging biomarkers. People in the longevity community love tracking biomarkers. Things like inflammation markers, cholesterol, blood glucose, insulin sensitivity, and hormone levels. And some people claim their labs improved after Epithalon. Now, there is no guarantee of that, but it is one of the reasons it is popular, because it is seen as a peptide that may improve the underlying aging environment in the body, not just superficial symptoms. Now, another question people ask is, does Epithalon help with weight loss? Epithalon is not a weight loss peptide. It is not like semaglutide. It is not like tirzepatide. It is not like retatrutide. It does not suppress appetite directly, but indirectly, it may support metabolism through better sleep and hormonal balance. Because poor sleep is one of the fastest ways to gain weight. When sleep is bad, hunger hormones change. Leptin and ghrelin shift. Cortisol rises. Blood sugar becomes unstable. Cravings increase. And inflammation increases. So if Epithalon improves sleep, it can indirectly support weight control. But it is not a primary weight loss peptide. Now, what about muscle building? Epithalon is not anabolic. It is not a steroid-like peptide. It is not a growth hormone peptide by itself. But again, better sleep means better growth hormone release. Better recovery means better workouts. Better inflammation control means less injury. So indirectly, it may support muscle maintenance, especially in older adults. Now, what about brain function? This is another area people talk about. Epithalon is sometimes described as neuroprotective. Some people report improved mental clarity, better memory, better mood, less brain fog. Now, is that a direct brain effect?
Possibly.
But again, sleep is brain medicine. If your sleep improves, your brain improves. So even if Epithalon only improved sleep, the mental benefits would still make sense. Now, I want to address one more major topic, and that is safety. Epithalon is generally considered one of the safer peptides in the longevity world. But you have to remember, purity matters, source matters, storage matters, reconstitution matters, and dosing matters. If you are using low-quality peptides, contaminated peptides, or peptides that have been stored improperly, you can have side effects that have nothing to do with Epithalon itself. That is why sourcing is critical. That is why sterile technique matters. That is why you should never reuse needles. That is why you should never guess your dosing. Now, how is Epithalon usually sold? Most commonly, it comes in vials, usually 10 milligrams per vial. Some suppliers carry 5 milligram vials. Some carry 20 milligram vials. But 10 milligrams is very common. Now, how is it reconstituted? Most people use bacteriostatic water. They inject bacteriostatic water into the vial. They swirl gently. They do not shake aggressively. And they store it in the refrigerator. Now, how long does it last after mixing? This depends on sterility and storage, but generally peptides are used within a few weeks once reconstituted, especially for longer protocols. Now, another question people ask is, do you need to refrigerate Epithalon? Yes. Unmixed vials should be stored in the freezer for long-term storage. And mixed vials should be stored in the refrigerator. That is standard peptide handling. Now, what about cycling? Do you need to cycle Epithalon? Yes. Most people cycle it. It is not usually taken non-stop. It is taken as a periodic longevity protocol. And the most common cycle is 10 days to 20 days. Then stop. Then repeat months later. Now, let's talk about what makes Epithalon unique compared to other peptides. Because there are a lot of peptides out there. And the peptide world is getting crazier every year. But Epithalon has a specific reputation. It is not flashy. It is not a fat loss drug. It is not a party peptide. It is not a gym bro peptide. It is more like the quiet, mysterious peptide that the longevity community keeps coming back to. And that is because it seems to influence aging at a deeper level. It is connected to the pineal gland. It is connected to sleep. It is connected to immune regulation. And it is connected to telomere science. Now, does that mean Epithalon is the fountain of youth?
No.
But if you were going to pick a peptide that represents the anti-aging philosophy, Epithalon would be near the top of the list. Now, I want to talk about realistic expectations. If you run Epithalon for 10 days, you might not wake up looking 20 years younger. That is not how biology works. But you might notice improved sleep. You might notice more stable energy. You might notice better recovery. You might notice a subtle shift in how your body feels. And if you combine that with good nutrition, strength training, sunlight, stress management, hydration, and quality supplements, then Epithalon might become part of a long-term anti-aging strategy. Because the real truth about longevity is that it is built, not bought. Peptides can support the process, but they cannot replace the fundamentals. Now, let's talk about a common question. How do you know if Epithalon is working? The easiest answer is sleep. If your sleep improves, that is a sign your body is responding. Another sign is improved recovery. Less soreness. Less joint stiffness. Less inflammation. Another sign is mood stability. More calm. Less anxiety. Less stress reactivity. Another sign is skin changes. More glow. More hydration. And another sign is your overall energy baseline. Not stimulant energy, but stable, clean energy. Now, if you want to track it scientifically, you could track sleep metrics. You could track resting heart rate. You could track heart rate variability. You could track inflammation markers. You could track fasting glucose. And you could track biological age testing if you really want to get advanced. Now, let's address something important. Epithalon is not the same as Epithalon nasal sprays you see on random websites. Be careful with those. Many of those products are not legit. And even if they are, dosing consistency is a problem. If you are serious about Epithalon, you want accurate dosing. Now, let's talk about who Epithalon is best for. Epithalon is typically used by people who are 35 and older, people who are noticing sleep changes, people who are noticing recovery issues, people who are noticing aging symptoms, people who are longevity-focused, people who want immune support, people who want to be proactive. Now, could someone younger use it?
Sure.
But it is more common in older adults. Now, what about women? Epithalon is extremely popular with women, especially perimenopausal and menopausal women, because sleep disruption is one of the biggest complaints during hormonal transition. And if Epithalon improves sleep, it can be a huge quality of life upgrade. And for women who feel like they are aging rapidly, Epithalon feels like a longevity support tool. Now, what about men? Men also use Epithalon, especially men who want better sleep and recovery. And many men combine it with growth hormone peptides and NAD support. Now, what about Epithalon and autoimmune disease? This is a complicated topic, because Epithalon has immune modulation potential. Some people with autoimmune conditions report benefits. Others may not. So, it is not something to jump into without medical guidance. But it is a peptide that many people consider when they want immune balance. Now, one more thing. Epithalon is often called a bioregulator peptide, meaning it is part of a family of peptides that are designed to support biological regulation of aging systems. These are different than peptides like GLP-1 drugs. GLP-1 drugs are more like metabolic hormones. Epithalon is more like a genetic signaling peptide. It is a completely different category. Now, before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap. Epithalon is a tetrapeptide derived from research related to the pineal gland. It is associated with melatonin regulation, circadian rhythm support, immune modulation, and potential telomerase activation. It is most commonly used in cycles, such as 10 milligrams daily for 10 days, or 5 milligrams daily for 20 days. It is not usually used year-round. Most people report benefits in sleep, mood, recovery, and overall well-being. It is considered one of the most popular longevity peptides. But it should be treated with respect, especially because of its connection to telomerase research. And as always, quality sourcing and proper dosing matter. Now, if you are someone who is building a longevity stack, Epithalon is one of those peptides that is worth understanding. Not because it is trendy, but because it has one of the most interesting scientific backstories in the peptide world. And if your goal is to sleep better, recover better, and support aging from the inside out, Epithalon is a peptide that many people consider a cornerstone. Disclaimer: this podcast episode is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and I am not giving medical advice. Epithalon and other peptides are research compounds and are not FDA approved for most uses. Always consult a licensed medical provider before using any peptide, supplement, or medication. Do not self-diagnose. Do not self-treat serious conditions. Use sterile technique, source responsibly, and understand the risks before using any research compound. Thanks for listening, keep learning, and stay curious.